Here's a long spoon, second alternate club for me that I use to tee off. Unfortunately, it's made of maple, and this batch of maple hasn't been holding up too well. And there's a little hairline crack right there. So before that spreads, I'm going to just put a leather insert. I don't know how deep it goes, so we'll find out in a moment. So we'll put a hardened leather insert on the face, we'll tack it in. And in order to do that, first thing we're going to do is remove the horn by using the heat gun. So how do you know when you're ready to get this horn off? You'll start to see the glue start to exude out or ooze out from the surface here, the edge right there. It's also starting to separate off. I can see it here. You can see a little bit here. And it's starting to separate off right here. That's the benefit of high glue, that you can reverse it with heat and humidity also. So let's see if we've gotten any progress. Oh, there it goes. It's coming off. It's definitely pliable. Just kind of work that off. Starting to come off. So I've had this running for about 5 minutes. I don't know if I'll be able to reuse the horn or not. It's definitely bent out of shape right now. And in the old days, guys like old Tom Morris and Hugh Phil, Robert Forgan, they would have just used a stove that was in their shop. The stove was pretty useful for a lot of things, for heating up pitch, heating up glue, and removing horn like this. It'll pop off here. There we go. Oh, there it goes. Hello. I don't want to touch that. It's probably pretty hot. Okay, that's it. Glue was a little, not as much glue as I normally have on there. A little thin. So I'm going to cut these pegs off, I believe. Just easier to work with it. Once it cools off, I'll see if I can put the horn back on. But the pegs are usually going in different directions, so it's hard to, you can see the one peg is angled, let's see if we can focus here. Yeah, the one peg's angled that way. This one's angled that way, so it's not really easy to get the horn back on. So I'll probably just re-drill if I have to. I'm inspecting the crack. I think it's here, that little crack there. And I do not see it entering into the sole, which is good news. I'll look with a magnifier as well. But what I'm going to do is change the loft a little bit on this club and get it so it's a little more lofted on the toe, so a little less hooked, not much more. I have a little trouble getting this up in the air compared to my first choice club, so maybe we'll put a little bit more loft on it as well. We'll start off with this fine rasp here that has a safe edge on it, so I don't have to worry about damaging that sidewall. I can come right into it. It makes it very simple. And I know the leather's going to be about the thickness of this rasp or thicker, so I'm going to come down to at least that thickness and use my rasp as a guide. But again, I'm thinking of making this a little bit of a wider head, so I probably won't take off all that much except at this end here, or just feather it in a little bit. See a bunch of striations here. We'll see which ones are cracks. Gotta be careful you don't change the loft too much. Okay, we're going to put the piece of leather in there. I learned how to do this from a video by Chris McIntyre. He posted about 10 years ago. So it's some pretty thick leather here. Toss it into not quite boiling water. And it's supposed to curl up like a potato chip, he said. I've only done this a couple times. So hopefully it'll curl up like a potato chip. I think you can only do this with rawhide leather. Oh, here we go. It's starting to curl up. It's supposed to curl up and then unfurl, my understanding. So we definitely got the curling part here. By the way, this press I found at a flea market. I don't know if it's an official golf ball press. I'm not sure what else it could be used for. Somebody said something to do with automotive use, maybe. But $2. I got 2 of them for $2 each. Well, I'm thinking this is enough. I'm hoping it's enough. We'll find out. I'll stick it in the press. There's the piece. Pretty rubbery. It's hard to describe. Probably need another couple clamps here. I can use my other ball press, actually. I have another one somewhere. I think that'll be okay. So we'll let that stay for a couple days. I noticed a little bit of a missing piece of material there. Probably when I used the rasp, I might have taken a chunk when I was going across the grain the wrong way. So I filled it in. I don't think it was part of the original crack because it developed afterwards. But so I filled it in with some epoxy. We'll let that dry overnight. Meanwhile, we're on day 1, about 24 hours. Let's see what the leather looks like. I put a little wax on here, so hopefully it'll be fairly easy to take off, and it is. So I can feel the moisture in it, and we can bend it. So this is, I was wondering at this point, did the club makers actually wait maybe a day like this where there's still some flexibility in it and then apply it on for clubs that had a lot of spooning on it? So for example, I have this bathing spoon here which has quite a bit of loft on it, and it's curved in this fashion. You don't see very often a piece of leather on a very lofted club. When I went to the museums, I didn't see that too often, but one of my friends was able to find me a picture or two with the bathing spoon and a leather insert, but it's not quite as often. The other thing that I noticed on those 2 clubs with the leather inserts, if I remember correctly, was the leather just was in the center of the face, kind of like a 1950s driver with an insert on it. So they didn't have to worry about the curve as much. So maybe they put it in like that, something like that. But if you look at it this way, it would be very difficult if there was no flexibility to get that leather insert in there. So perhaps on day 1, like we have here, they were able to put it in. If you look here, this edge is not really cleaned up well at this point. So I need to make sure that we remove all this material here. So we'll do that with a chisel. So I already came in from above with a chisel. I'm just trying to remove this material here. And I don't want to pry. You want to just kind of come in from the side and from the top. And that piece has been removed. Let's check it out now. So we're definitely close there. There's a little piece here. So let's see how our leather fits. So that's getting closer. So I see a little bit of a gap here. So we'll see if we can fix that up a little bit. While I didn't show it here, I took this chisel and made it, I just angled it about a degree or two more inclined. Now we seem to have a much better fit here. Let me show you how I created this smooth surface here. This is the lion miter trimmer, otherwise used during the French Revolution. But it has an adjustable fence that you can see here. I'll adjust it on the other side. You can adjust it from 90 degrees to more than 45 degrees. This is a little detent button here that gets it to 45 degrees, and even that's micro adjustable. So I set it here to close to 90 degrees to the same angle as the angle on the club. Okay, so let's take a little piece off here. I'll put the leather up against the fence here. Move it in slightly. Okay, let's see what that looks like on the other side. Here are the little strips that came off. So it gives you a very clean cut. There's the end of it. Not too many of you will probably have a miter trimmer, but if you want to, you can plane this down. If you have a shooting board, you can do that too. The other thing is you might want to plane this one edge if you're using some sort of trimmer like that. At this point, I could have done this earlier. Let's trim off the pegs. I'm just using a very low kerf saw here. Probably not a traditional saw. It's a low kerf saw. This is a cheap one from Harbor Freight. I have a little nicer one here that has really no kerf at all on it. It cuts a little more efficiently, but it has no teeth at the end here, so it's a little harder to get to, and I might not be able to get to that last peg with it. Hitting the peg now. If you can't get your saw in there, you can just use a chisel. So here I'm only going to get a couple teeth in. Too many teeth there. I like cutting with a saw. There we go. We'll just take it off that way. You want a real sharp blade because you're cutting through end grain. And now what we can do at this point is just use a file or rasp here that has that safe edge again, so it doesn't cut on that edge. Place that up against the mortise, the back wall of that mortise, and make sure that this is, you don't feel anything popping out. So you don't want to feel any of those pegs. I might actually deepen this mortise mortise a little bit so that the horn is a little thicker. So that feels good there. Just this last one, I feel a little bit of a protrusion. sure that the back edge is perfectly cleaned up too. I feel some crunching from the glue. So I'm going to go very lightly. I'm going against the grain here. So go very lightly. The grain's running this way. So we'll just take off. You don't have to really take off the glue. I just want to make it smooth. If it's hide glue, you don't have to take it off. If it's a modern glue, you do. Just cleaning up that mortise for the horn. So I'm going to double check this and make sure. I got a little bit of a gap here, but I think that's okay. There's enough bend in the leather that we're not going to really have a gap, I don't believe. At this point, I have my hide glue heating up. Here you could see a line to outline the bottom of that mortise, and it'll make it a little easier to cut. So we're going to shave down to this line with a block plane. You let me know because I have a hard time seeing it, and we're getting close here. So I guess you can use a block plane. I don't have too much experience with leather inserts here, so let's see if a card scraper works. It works nicely as well. Thing is that it's going to be a little more difficult to get it to yes, you can certainly use a nice card scraper. You're getting nice shavings here, so that's another option. I'm getting shavings as well with the block plane. All right, so I'm just about down the line. One more pass here. I think that'll be good. You can see the shavings we have here. Looks like bacon. Okay, this will be the fit here. I'll give it a little bit of an overhang, just a couple shavings worth. We got some overlap here, and we'll glue this first, I believe, with the hide glue, and then I'll put the tacks in. I'll see. I could put the tacks in also right after the glue. The problem is the glue sets pretty quickly, the hide glue, so I might just clamp it up with some modern clamps, get it on quickly, and then put some tacks in there later. This is some day-old hide glue. It's very thick, so we'll add a little spray of water, a couple. Okay, and then let it heat up. If you put too much water, just leave the lid open, let it evaporate off. So we'll let that sit for a few minutes till it thins out a little bit. So this hide glue here is a combination of two different glues. You could certainly do that. 315 is a stronger gram strength one, and 192. This sets much quicker. So to slow the set down, I add some 192. So it's about 2/3 of the 315 and about 1/3 of that. This, if you use only the 192, that's too weak. 50-50 I think would be fine. That'll get you in the 200 range, and that should be fine as well. Let's look at the consistency of the glue. I've had it in the double boiler for a while. So you do want to see it kind of run down. And I think we're ready there. Although, oh, there's a piece of wood or something that got in there. That's what I'm feeling. Yeah, I think we're good. You just want to have it, it depends on the stirrer that you're using. If you're using like a little nail or something to stir it, it's not going to run as much. But I think we're probably pretty good here. The other thing you could do is put it on your fingers and see how tacky it is. Within a few seconds, it should kind of get tacky. Actually, I think it's a little thin. So I'm going to let this, let the water evaporate a little bit. Here's just a test run using clamps and a caul here. The caul is just the leftover piece of wood after cutting out one of the club heads. So it's good to save that. I have a caul with a piece of wood on top. And this is sometimes good when you're shaping a club as well. You sometimes need it to put in the vise if the club's kind of flopping around. But I'm using it now for the leather. It's kind of a little bit of a difficult setup without the caul. My guess is they didn't use this. I'm guessing they just used the thin enough glue that they had a long enough time to put in little brads or tacks. There are different sizes here that you can see. I'm going to use this very small one. I'm afraid of cracking the wood. I've seen that happen. Might end up using a brad like this if I don't get enough grab on it, but I'm going to try to use this very small tack or little nail here to hold it in place. If that doesn't work, then this test run shows I should be able to still clamp it up and get good apposition of the leather to the face. Let's look at the glue here. And that's kind of what you want. You see how it's running? Whoop. Yeah, it's running down. It's not one drop. You want like a little bit of a stream. If you use straight up 315, you have very little time to work with. The glue often sets within a minute, unless your shop or the piece of wood has been heated up. So let's apply the glue, and then we'll get our tacks nearby, and a hammer, and see what we can do. Okay, we got our leather ready. I put one tack, just starting it to get things ready. Got my glue brush, got my other tacks here, and here we go. Put it on pretty liberally. Put it on both surfaces. And put it on the edge there. Oh, sorry, we need it on the other edge. We don't have too much time here. Okay. That seems to be holding. I want to make sure. Okay, that's good. This stuff's probably already starting to set in. And it's not the easiest thing to hold these nails in place. And these are so thin that hopefully we don't have to worry about creating stress cracks in it. Yeah, fat fingers, I think I have luck here. Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap there. So let's put a little clamp. So this might have dried already, so I'm going to... Actually, it hasn't dried yet. So I'm going to put a clamp here. In fact, let's see if this does anything. No, I don't think so. So let's go to the caul. It's actually holding things together a little more. I saw some more glue squeeze out here, which is a good sign. But that means those tacks really weren't holding it in place enough. So I can't get any more compression there. So I think we're good. In fact, I might get this. Yeah. You can't really see what's going on from your angle. Let's rotate that. But there's a little... There might be a little gap there. I think it'll be okay. Right at the tail end there. So I noticed there was a little gap here. So I moved the clamp up higher. And now I got some more bend on it. So I got better apposition of the leather against the face. So I have a heat gun here. I'm going to heat it up. And you may not appreciate it, but I could see the glue kind of bubbling up. So I know it's kind of reheated, which is a good thing. And I'm probably going to put another clamp on as well. So that should be enough to, because I think it had solidified already. So we'll put another clamp on in the middle. I think there's room there as well. Time to release the clamps. I'm gonna watch, make sure. Good, that did not pop open there. Okay, good. I have it bent over a little bit. You can see what happened there. So we'll cut this here, and we'll spoke shave this overhang here, and use a chisel for this side. That's why I removed a lot of it ahead of time. So for this part, we're just using a chisel. One thing to be aware of is that the grain is running in this direction. So you have to be careful on the wood when you get to the wood that you don't take out a big chunk. So we're actually pretty flush right here. I don't need to remove any material there. At this point, pretty close to where I need to be. I may just use a scraper here. Again, I don't have too much experience with these leather inserts, but pretty much you can figure it out by knowing how all the other tools work. That's a scraper. The other thought is to use the file with the safe edge, and that probably, yeah, that'll do. That'll clean it up nicely. And I can even deepen this if I'd like a little bit. Oh, my horn is about the same thickness as this rasp. Again, very thin passes here because we are going against the grain. I want to just clean out these back edges, make sure there is nothing sticking out, otherwise the horn's going to move away from the back wall. You can kind of hear a click, and these little pieces come out. It's because I was using the rasp and it wasn't getting right in that corner. It doesn't have a completely sharp edge, so you want to get rid of some of this. Here we're using the spoke shave. That makes pretty quick work of things. Question is, did club makers use spoke shaves? I believe the answer is yes. Some people would say no, but I think if you were any type of woodworker, you were probably using a spoke shave. Just reposition this here because my handle was hitting the workbench. And I'm thinking the next tool will be the card scraper. At this point I could just use a rasp or a scraper. Let's try the scraper first. That gets in there nicely. I'm just sighting down the club here. That part's done. I just need to get the rest here. I think I'll hit the rest with the rasp maybe. I'm almost done. Just getting the overhang here. That's one of the benefits of having a workbench vise above your table, so that, and then I have this angle here on the jaw, so I can really come in steeply here. If you think you're done, you're not until all of this wood is, the stain is going to be removed. So I feel a little lip there. It's smooth there. So I don't need to work on that side, just on this side. That's pretty close. That will just require a little bit of sanding. One problem I noticed here is that the leather actually had a curve on the edge, and I forgot to take that into account. So this edge is a little lower than the center, so I'm working on trying to flatten this all out. So I want this whole thing to be one flat surface. So we're almost there. I'm just putting some guidelines on. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. I'm looking for a gap here, and I don't really see one. So I think we'll be okay. This, of course, will require a new horn. So, at this point, we have the leather all smoothed on the three surfaces and good contact there. I'm going to sand a little bit on that one edge right here. But now it's time to put the horn in. So we'll grab a piece of horn here. Well, most of my horn is actually too narrow for this. There's a little bit of an overhang here. So luckily I found a piece of horn that's a little bit wider. And we'll use that one. I think this is from an old piece. So I'm just looking at the general fit here. Obviously it's not fitting in this angle here. So let's set the bevel gauge to find this angle. And we'll transfer that. Now this smooth side will go up against the back edge. So this will be, actually should, well, yeah, measure it off. Well, this is pretty parallel, so that's fine. So we will, normally I'm doing it the other way. I'm making the angle on the horn first, and then transferring that to the wood. So we'll cut that and see how it fits. So grab a saw that you don't love too much. This one has a tooth missing. So I use that to cut the horn. I also use dust collection. We'll cut on that same angle. Okay, let's see how that ends up fitting. Okay, it's a little off here. So I can either recut it, or let's try a chisel first and see how that works. This will require sharpening again, but not a big deal. Don't be afraid of sharpening. Find a way that makes you want to use your tools. Obviously, you don't want to use this on a piece of metal or anything, but make sure I'm angling pretty straight down now. Or not angling at all, I should say. We'll see how that looks. We might have to clean it up with a little file. All right, let's see what this looks like. Okay, already a better fit. We'll hit it with the file a little bit. This is a float. It tends to give a smoother finish. Got to be really careful here that we don't round things over. Yeah, see, I'm rounding it over. So we're gonna... Some of this horn, it does have a grain. Yeah, that should be better. Okay, I'm satisfied with that fit. Marking the end of the toe. We'll put 3 marks here. I don't want to go through the leather, so I'll start in the center here. That's 1 dot, 2 dots, 3 dots. We'll angle it pretty steeply so we don't hit the leather. Actually, we don't even need to worry about that. I think we'll be okay. As long as we angle it just a little bit, it's not going to hit the leather. And hopefully we don't hit any nails coming through. We might. It's possible. Grab some pegs. Some of these pegs are 1/4 inch, which were used sometimes, but I think it was closer to 7/32 of an inch for some of the clubs, and that's what I have here. Actually, these might all be the same. Yeah, this is 1/4 inch, sorry. That's a 1/4 inch there. So these are all good to go. You want to push this horn up hard against the back wall while you're drilling. It's a little harder here because I have the shaft on. Normally I don't have the shaft on. So we'll go ahead and drill. I'm lazy today. I'm going to use the electric drill today rather than my egg beater drill. 7/32 of an inch. Double check that. We'll start in straight until we kind of get our bearings. Once it kind of catches, then you want to angle it. And you want to angle it definitely more than the loft. Otherwise, you go through the face. And we'll set a little peg in there just to ensure that things aren't going to move on us. We'll do the second hole here. Angle it a little bit. That's not good. So what ended up happening here was something shifted. I normally put a clamp here and I forgot to do that. And there's a gap here now. So what we're going to do is fill this hole in with glue, put a dowel in there, and then go back and redo it again. Let the glue dry for a few minutes. Put a little glue in here. I don't want it seeping out. Put a little glue on the peg. And we'll clean that off really well after it goes in. A little wet towel here. So what happened here, and the reason the horn moved that way, was there was a little arc in the wood. There was a little piece on the bottom here that I didn't notice, and it caused the horn to not sit well along the back wall. So when I pushed here, it would kick out the horn that way, and vice versa. So all I did was remove that piece, and there was still a little bit of rocking, and at that point I just took the scraper and took 3 or 4 shavings off, just a few shavings off of the horn with the scraper in the middle to get rid of that high spot. Now when I press here, it's not reacting, it's not pushing the horn out. So that should hold better now. Okay, we have the horn clamped back in to the vise. Added this other clamp here, and there's no gap, and hopefully there won't be a gap. Okay, so we got the one in there. Put a little peg in there to hold it in place. Just a very light tap so I can hopefully get that out. Okay, a little deeper. Okay, put another peg in here. Hold that in place. Last hole here. We'll go in a slightly different angle. Okay, that should do it. All right, 3 holes. I don't really know the real depth of these. Oh, I forgot to mention that I ended up curving this horn a little bit to fit here. I just use the heat gun to get it to fit better around here. We'll have to hammer these nails down a little bit later. Okay, glue pot is going. I think that's a good consistency there. Yeah, drips a little bit in a continuous string, and then it goes into a few drops, so that should be fine. So we'll dip the pegs in. We will brush on the hide glue. Get that filled in pretty well. Let's grab this saw and we'll cut off. You want to leave a little bit extra to use kind of as its own clamp. Watch your fingers here. So we'll peen that over. That's a little too much. Yeah, there we go. Slide it off. That's a little too flush there. We'll peen that over. Typically this end always needs a clamp. You can use clamps with a non-lofted or a not heavily lofted club like this, but once you start getting to the more lofted clubs, you gotta use something else oftentimes. Okay, I think that'll do it. So we'll let that settle for a few hours. Let's get these protruding pegs down flat to the horn. Then I'll cut this off. I like to put the club in a clamp or a vise to cut this and give it support. You'll see what I mean in a second. Once we get this flattened, I'll be able to get a little. So that's all I'm trying to do for now. We'll clean that up more. But this will help me secure the horn in the vise, so when I'm cutting it, I'm not lifting up on it too much and putting a lot of pressure on that fresh glue surface. All right, we'll put this in. I'm a little limited because of the shaft on here in terms of my clamping options. Put this in, give it some support, so when I'm putting pressure here, I'm not gonna force, open up the glue line there. I'll just use a Japanese saw. Float here to clean up the tip of the horn. Note I'm working towards the wood. If I came out this way, this horn would chip off. Just like a piece of wood, you're working with it. If you're going against the grain or off of end grain, it'll fracture. You can see that this peg, you always want to leave a little room further back than you think, because this horn is going to angle back. Want to make sure that the rasp does not hit this end, otherwise it's going to fracture some of that wood. Okay, we'll clean up this surface now on the sole of the horn, or sole of the club in the horn. Still a little peg here. Sometimes you can use a plane, but it's a little risky, especially if it's low angle, because you can get these chip outs like that. So better to use a scraper or a file or a rasp. What works well actually is the Shinto rasp, which I showed in one of my previous videos on rasps. This is nice because it's not creating as much dust. So that's just a scraper. I'm in my garage now with the garage doors open and a little more ventilation. This can create a lot of dust. I'm going to use the Shinto rasp here. This one happens to have that crook-necked handle, which I'm not too fond of. So this is, I bought another one recently, and that'll be my go-to for wood. So if there's any wear and tear, I'd rather have it on this. Using the rough side right now, I can flip it over and use the fine side. You could certainly use any sort of rasp, but the problem with that is good rasps are expensive. So I'm trying to use one of the cheaper ones on this hard material. Pay attention that you don't ding the backside of the club, so try to keep the tool as parallel as you can to the saw. In fact, you can even lean it forward slightly to give it a little bounce. You can see the horn protruding from the face. One of the key things is to make sure that that leading edge on a long nose club is straight, is on that leading edge. But the face is cupped. The old clubs were cupped a little bit, even the long spoon and the play club, but certainly the more lofted ones are cupped here. So the wood is cupped, but then it gradually becomes, the leading edge is straight. So it's almost like a cone shape area of cuppiness, if that makes sense. Okay, let's get these tacks in so we don't damage our tool. For this leading edge, I'm usually using a couple different tools. One would be the scraper, kind of to begin with. But it's easy to cup this, so you gotta really keep an eye on it. You wanna, if anything, get these ends off first. Once you're close, you're not gonna have a perfectly straight leading edge. That's where the rasp or the float or the file come in. So you can just go like this, almost about 45 degrees to the face. Just go back and forth, and that will certainly take off the high spots and straighten everything out. One of my go-to finishes is to use trans-tint dye, either vintage maple or red brown. The vintage maple is more of a yellowy red type of thing, and it just gives it a different depth sometimes. And then sometimes I'll use a General Finishes mahogany type of stain. Sometimes I'll use a paint, which is really kind of what they used in the real old days. It was a kind of a ruttle, they called it, I believe, or just an ochre type of thing. So this, I'm seeing here, this is not penetrating hardly at all. I could wait for the stain to dry a little more, or the oil to dry, sorry, a little more. But yeah, I think we're going to end up putting in some, I mean, I'd really have to sand this quite a bit, lose some of the swing weight possibly to get it, and lose some of the shape to get it to penetrate more, I believe. I mean, could I leave it? Nah, it's a little too pink there. So we'll let it soak in and see what happens, but I have a feeling even after a couple of coats of this that it's going to not look too great. So I'll probably add a little of this Williamsburg red paint. We'll try this red ochre paint from Williamsburg Paints. It's as close to the original type of paint they used in the early 1800s, as far as I can tell, which was just kind of the oxides that were found in riverbeds and things like that. So yeah, so a paint obscures the grain, while a dye does not. Stain partially obscures it. So maple is, to me, I have a lot of trouble with maple. It just penetrates very poorly into the wood. So I almost kind of burnish this on. I'll get it on pretty well distributed, and then rub off as much of it as I can. Normally I would take the whipping off, but I'm too lazy to do that. Anything that you don't want on the lead here, you can just take off with mineral spirits. It's thick on it now, but we'll rub it off and we'll be able to see some grain at least. If you look at a lot of the clubs, when I was doing research on them at the museums, I was trying to look at the grain and how the wood was running up the neck. And I had the darndest time because they were using a real heavy stain or paint. You had a hard time seeing what was going on. Okay, so I'll go in with the cloth and rub off as much as I can at this point. Make that the same color and rub it off, I guess. Did we get it everywhere? Yeah, okay. Let's rub that off. Just rub off really hard, almost burnishing it. So you will start to see the grain again. For whatever reason, this stuff gets in there better than any stain that I have for the maple. And if you burnish it like this, you don't have to wait the 3 days or so that oil paint typically takes to dry. Usually overnight is all I do. And then I'll put shellac on it. So a little light here. I think we'll hit it again. Got to watch for those edges. It's always easy to eat through a finish on the corners and edges. Well, I forgot to record the shellac part. I used this These just little rubber, they call it. It's just a t-shirt wrapped inside another ball of a t-shirt. Keep it in a jar here, and I have a little string at the top to hold it, and I've used that probably for 50 clubs. And just some 2-pound cut de-waxed shellac, which is a powder that I mix with. I use grain alcohol, 190 proof grain alcohol. It's less toxic. And this is the pumice stone. I'll just put a little bit more on that. I think it's 4F. Just put a little bit on a felt pad. That's all you need. So after the shellac cured or dried overnight, I'm now hitting with the pumice powder. It just takes the extra shine off a little bit. Well, here's the final leather insert, all done, with the head finished, refinished. And it's not easy work, I would say. If I was a club maker back in the day, I would think I'd charge about half the price of an actual club. The materials themselves for a golf club are not all that expensive, but it's really the labor. So we'll give it a shot on the simulator and see what happens. I'm on hole 17 at the old course here, and the leather insert has held up really well so far. There's not a indentation or anything, so I'm very satisfied with it. I took a little bit of weight off in the back of the club because the swing weight was about E2. I got it down to D8. While working that recess for the leather insert, I changed the loft a little bit. It was at about 12 or 13 degrees. I made it to 14 degrees, so I'm getting a little bit more loft than I used to. These leather inserts were not uncommon. I don't think they were the majority of clubs, but you'll see them now and then if the face was starting to wear off. They were popular in the gutta percha era, so latter half of the 1800s, and some of the clubs that were used during the feather ball era, when the ball was softer, they were converted with these leather inserts. But you'll see leather face inserts on clubs throughout the latter half of the 1800s. I don't think it was a feature on long-nosed clubs during the feather ball era, but I could be wrong. I'm playing the old course at 6,032 yards, the red tees, with no wind, and with a very similar score as the last time I played it. I'm 1 over after the road hole. I do believe the distances on this simulator are longer, sometimes significantly longer, although if you get a very firm day, it might be close. Here's that long spoon again with the insert. Sorry about the delay, got a lot of swing thoughts going through my head. I seem to fall apart on this back nine. I started off puring the drives in the front nine and started kind of losing them with some low pulls, maybe coming over the top, I don't know. So that was a bit of a low liner there. Middle spoon here, 160s. Middle spoon has 20 degrees of loft. And that's my go-to club for fairway shots. When I played this hole the only time for real, it was 10:40 at night. Really cool with the lights on. Very hard to see the ball, but we finished the round. So I hope you enjoyed watching the Making of a club with a leather insert. Give it a try.